It's all about humanity. About humanity. It's all about humanity. About humanity. It's all about humanity. It's all about humanity. About humanity. It's all about humanity. About humanity. It's all about humanity.
Hello, model citizens. Welcome to Humanity Junction. Tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about my adventures from the weekend. This past weekend was Island Ops 2023, and we'll get into that a little bit more in a couple of minutes. Cameron's asking if I learned something. I think that might be debatable, but I think we might just figure it out as we go along this evening. If you can kind of catch behind me, I do actually have some trains running back there in the shadows tonight, and I did that because I seem to not be able to stop adding cameras to my layout. I've got even more cameras now on the layout, so I thought I'd start off tonight by showing you the latest addition to all of my cameras. We'll see if they all even come up. But I've got one on staging, which we won't see anything running in because the train doesn't actually get into staging. But then we can kind of follow this train around and see the path it takes. Just a little point-to-point layout going back and forth as the case might be. Now, I'm not sure which one of these I might put. I think I need to switch the order of those, because if you look way in the distance on this shot now, you can see the train coming in at the very, very far end of the railroad. So I should probably swap those two on my little panel so that they are in the opposite locations. And after it gets to a certain point, then we can switch back to the other side and see the train heading around the corner. It does look like the cameras are definitely a little bit out of sync or something, but this is the new camera that I don't know why this camera doesn't want to seem to work for me for some reason. I keep I keep trying. I keep going to it and nothing happens. So I don't really know. I don't really know what's going on. It is meet and greet month. If you just saw Wilmer's show on Indian Head Indian Head Valley Railroad, he just talked. They just had a little meet and greet down. It was actually turned out to be a pretty big meet and greet down at Timonium. But the meet and greet that I think some people are talking about is the one in Greeley, Colorado, and I'm wearing a meet and greet shirt tonight in honor of it. But yep, May 19th to 21st, meet and greet in Greeley, Colorado. My events list is getting shorter. Typing on the Fire tablet is iffy. Maybe it's dark where the last camera is. I wish that was the case. Unfortunately, it just doesn't like loading. I don't know what the deal is with it. It kind of like comes and then goes, and I keep trying. You know, I figure, what do they say? The definition of insanity is trying the same thing over and over again and just getting the same results. So I may need to reset that camera or something like that, but we're not going to worry about that. I'm not going to worry about it. What am I coming around to? What did I miss? Oh, but he's more curious each day. Oh, Ian, are you talking about the new one? Ian's got a new model railroader in the family, so that's a little exciting addition to the group. So we wish everybody well over there. Sparky's probably lurking, or he's getting ready for the meet and greet. He's got another big trip planned. Yeah, I'm sure the camera's on. If I try it randomly throughout the night, it will just like randomly eventually start working. Okay, maybe not then, but we're getting there. Should we jump right in? Let's jump right into Island Ops. I had a fantastic experience this weekend. Let's see if the slides come up correctly. Yeah, so this weekend was Island Ops. What Island Ops is it's basically put on by the West Island Model Railroad Club, but they highlight all of the layouts, a lot of the layouts on the island of Long Island, hence Island Ops. And there's one layout that's up in the Bronx, but all of the layouts I visited were out on Long Island. Getting to layouts out on Long Island is a bit of an adventure. I've got to, travel quite a distance. You would think they would be pretty close, but the layout I went to on Friday night took me 2 hours to get to, and then most of the rest of them were somewhere between an hour and 15, hour and a half to get to by car. But fantastic. Yeah, Manhattan Island to Long Island. Yeah, still both islands. But I had a fantastic time and I learned a lot, and it was great being where I'm at in my sort of journey of operations to get to operate on a bunch of other layouts and see how other people do it. Yeah, the ops bug has 100% bitten me, and I forget who we were talking to, but we were talking about that journey of, running trains in circles, and then at some point you kind of start thinking, I wonder if there's something else. But no, I didn't get mugged. New York City, New York area is probably the safest place or one of the safest places you can be in the US. So, the Bronx lived on the mainland. Is that an actual person? Uh-oh, Lynn has an ops question. Lynn, do you want to ask it now, or should I get into my weekend? Because I will say the weekend started off with a little bit of a bang, I guess you can kind of say. The first thing, I got to the first layout, pulled out my throttle, put the batteries in, and the throttle didn't work. Took me a little while. Eventually, I figured out that the battery case on the throttle, I had busted it. So here I am in an op session, and my throttle that I brought didn't work. So that was kind of disappointing that was broken. But I did bring it back home. I glued it back together, and I added a bunch of rubber bands around it. And funny enough, rubber bands seem to work pretty well, and there's plenty of room in the case. You can see the rubber bands in there in the case. So it's fixed now. It's working now. I did get a little bit of JB Weld, and it does say right on the side of it UW50 repair. So I will be at some point taking it apart again and putting some JB Weld plastic bonder on it, just to probably so I can take the rubber bands off. Let's see. So Dennis asked a question. What are your top 3 things you've learned? I'm also bitten by the ops bug. I'll get into that a little bit more, but I think the biggest thing that I learned is kind of what John's talking about, is that there are so many changes that I want to make to my own layout now that I'm really struggling with whether I should just keep going, because I think the foundation of my layout is decent, but what I know now, I would make significant changes to it. So I'm half thinking about starting over, and I'm half thinking about just keep going and continuing to make mistakes. One of the other big lessons that I learned, though, was that probably part of my thing about trying to figure out where to start for ops is that I want things to go well. I want to be able to invite people over, have them run the layout, or even just me run the layout myself, and have things work, and have, cars go where they're supposed to go, and have like the train lengths be the right length and everything. And the other thing that I'm learning is that if you get it about 80% right, I think you're probably about, at least in my world, you're probably about as good as you're going to get it. Because to get that last 20%, if you know about the Pareto principle, to get that last 20% is going to take such a huge amount of work that just focus on that first 80%, get yourself 80% of the way there. Every layout that I went to this weekend had an issue of some sort. And you just kind of work through it. And people, once people kind of figured out what the issue was, you kind of, put it aside and then would move on. And that was a big lesson of the weekend, is that things don't have to things don't have to be perfect. So you're asking, how the heck did I break a throttle? What I think happened was I was holding the throttle and I went to reach over and I hit the throttle on the edge of the fascia of the layout when I was at Dave Barraza's New York and Atlantic. And I hit the edge of the layout. The batteries popped out, the battery cover popped out and flew all over. Found the batteries, put them back in, and the throttle was fine for the rest of the ops session, but I think that's when it actually broke. So that's how I think, Gorilla Tape and glue, but I think I'm going with the JB Weld. Oh, yeah, that's true too. The 9-volt batteries in the old Digitrax throttles, that was never good. It's not that things aren't working. It's that 80% of things aren't working, and the other 20% you just kind of move on. Yeah, what was nice about Island Ops is the way most people set things up is that they would have some experienced operators there that would help the new people. And it was great having someone experienced there, because in a lot of cases, there are nuances to the specific layout that if you don't know, you can kind of get hung up and then you get like stuck on something and it becomes hard to move forward. Yeah, things do go south on the real railroads. I've seen your video. It involves a drill. Where you say, what 20% isn't working? We'll get into each layout and we'll talk a little bit more about what the 20% is that's not working. Maybe sometimes not specifically, because I think in a lot of cases, the 20% not working was a little bit more of a, was more just a lesson to be learned, not necessarily. In some cases, it was an actual problem. In other cases, it was just when the layout owner has an idea and they try and convey it to you via car cards or a switch list or anything like that, you don't always get the story. And sometimes you need to kind of, get a little information and kind of bridge the gap between the two things. Trackside Mike saying, don't let wig wag workshop around JB Weld. I'm a little nervous actually about doing the JB Weld on the throttle. I don't want to send it back to them to fix it. I think I did kind of break it. But I'm going to wait until I'm really well rested and set things up so that I can be as delicate as possible and hopefully not get JB Weld all over everything. Otter Creek and Rio Grande from Split Rock says you will find the 20% when you host your first op session. And the 20% was pretty much different on every single layout. So it's not so much that, IDT 10 codes came up a lot. So it's not so much that, like, if I solve that 20% that I saw at this layout, that then I would have solved, my other ones. And so Dave BNSF says doesn't work well on Delrin. So it's nylon plastic, and I specifically got the JB Weld for plastic bonding. I have the regular JB Weld. I didn't want to use that because it would probably work, but this is more specifically designed for gluing nylon back together. So that's why I got that. That's why I went with that. You may notice I got a book here. This book just came in today. This book, I don't know if people have heard of this guy, Lance Minheim, but this book just came out on April 23rd of 2023. So I grabbed this off of, there we go, 2023. So I grabbed this off of Amazon and I thought I'd check it out. This is the 4th book in his switching layout series. So being as I kind of have a shelf switching layout, which is essentially what he focuses on, I thought this would be interesting to get. So yeah, so that's why that's there. Should we? Who never heard of Lance? Yeah, I figured that. And I use, what did I use JB Weld? I used JB Weld on a plastic thing that I broke, and it worked really well. I just got this to be, more specific. And I didn't know they make different versions of JB Weld. We've talked about this before, but glue is definitely a thing that you end up collecting. And it's just kind of the way it is. So let's go back. Let's check out a couple of the layouts that I went to. Friday night I went to Vince Lee's Erie 28th Street. This is a layout that is 8 feet long by 2 feet wide at the most. It may even be smaller than that. He modeled just the Erie Railroad's New York City 28th Street Pier. And that was the whole layout. But the layout is just absolutely incredible. The details and everything are really neat. So Dennis, I don't know Lance's answer, but I will say that having long tracks between each location doesn't disqualify it from being a switching layout. In my mind, at least, a switching layout would be something you can, operate on, whether it's even a switching puzzle, which would just be, just a small thing, or whether it's a whole layout. But there might be 20 minutes of track between 2 yards. That doesn't, I think, not make it a switching layout. So this layout was great. There were 2 of us there, myself and a gentleman named Dan Shepard. This was the locomotive that we ran for the majority of the evening. It's Erie number 20 box cab. This is a locomotive that I forget all the details. I think he bought it, but then he put a 44-ton drive unit in it because it was it just ran better, and he put a sorry, I'm like totally blanking now. I'm reading other people's comments. No book report. I didn't do book reports in high school or anything. I don't know that I'm doing book reports. So the thing that I learned on this layout in particular was that HO scale in 8 feet by 2 feet, you can spend 3 hours on an op session with 2 people and just work your brain to the bone. I mean, I know there's no bone in the brain, but you know what I'm saying. I was so exhausted after operating this layout because of how much thinking there was to do. Essentially what the op session was is he had a car float, and you were pulling trains off of the car float, and then there were 2 warehouses. There was an inbound warehouse and an outbound warehouse. So the inbound warehouse was on one side, the outbound warehouse was on the other. There was a runaround track in the center. So you had to move cars from the inbound track to the outbound track, and then you pulled cars off the car float and moved them into the inbound tracks, and then you would take the cars that needed to go back out onto the float from the outbound tracks back onto the float. And we did basically 2.5 car floats worth of cars, and each car float held about 11 cars, I think he did. They could have held a little bit more, but essentially they held 11 cars. So this was the inbound setup, and there are a couple small changes that he made in modeling this, but the track plan is, for the most part, the actual track plan of the 28th Street Pier when this was operating back in the 1950s. And it was just beautiful. This is the outbound warehouse. There was a little bit of picketing going on. He's had this layout kind of completed for a while. It's built as 2 4-foot modules that he can connect together. So it is kind of portable. He's moved it around a couple times, but this is the inbound side of the railroad, and just a lot of just really nice little details. You can see, let me go back to this. If you look in the very left bottom of the corner, you can see he even has the bolts on the rails where the joiners would be, bolting it together. Yeah, and that's what was so neat about this layout as well, is you didn't need you didn't need a lot of track to move a lot of trains. Dennis, I think that would be kind of accurate, although, you know, you might have a loop on a switching layout. I think a switching layout can be railfanned. A railfan layout cannot necessarily um, be switched. Not necessarily. Andy says, has a little more space between the tracks. You can read the numbers. Actually, the track spacing was pretty much the same. There's one area where he didn't put the tracks in. And at this point, he didn't, he's not sure that he would add them just because. Yeah. Ray, I don't know what I said at this point. Yeah, when you have a small layout, you get hyper focused on all the details. And that was interesting too about the weekend is all of the layouts that I went to had a lot of detail on them. A lot of detail on them. Did I pocket some car cards? I did not pocket some car cards. that would not be nice. But yeah, lots of cool details. A tugboat with the car float. And just gorgeous, gorgeous looking tugboat. He also had, I don't know what this, I mean, it's a barge, but it's a indoor barge or something. But he had this New York Central barge as well. And just nice, really just nice detail work. All of the decals and everything on it is really interesting as well. So the other thing you'll notice as we go through tonight is I took a lot of pictures at the first layout, and I started taking less and less pictures as the weekend went on. Essentially, I got more and more comfortable operating as the weekend went on, and because of that, I then spent more time operating and less time as a viewer or a watcher. I don't know if they're resin built or not. I don't know the answer. Yeah, it was. It was like, you know, the more I started doing it, the more I got into the operations part of things. This is how he managed the car floats and the car cards. So were we using, no, we were using a switch list ish, but he had this to keep track of where the cars were. So this is actually the layout. The top left is the inbound, the bottom right is the outbound. The two tracks on the top right were his crane tracks, and the tracks in the bottom left were the team tracks. And every time a car float came in, he would move the car cards around so that he knew where the cars were. But we were operating off of a switch list. So the switch list had two sides. The first side was everything coming in. The second side was everything going out. And that's how we kind of worked through it. But yeah, I took a lot of pictures. I really enjoyed this layout. The size of it was just perfect as you know, my first layout for the weekend. It was overwhelming, but it wasn't too overwhelming. And yeah. So Erie 28th Street by Vince Lee. I met his son as well. His son has come and dispatched at another layout that I operate on. So there's a lot of model railroaders in this family. Yeah, so the way we ran it was there were two of us. So every car float, we would switch off who was the engineer and who was the conductor. Dan Shepard was the other island ops participant that was there with me. And Dan had been there once before, like 5 years ago. So I kind of said, oh, Dan, you should probably be the conductor first then. So Dan got to do the thinking part first. I ran the trains, and then for the second float, I became the conductor, and then we, went back and forth. Heath, did you let all these layout owners know you were a big YouTube star? They should be in the chat. Some of them know, some of them don't know. It's just, yeah, some know, some don't. Originally I thought I might film things more, but I'm kind of in this space of it's hard to be a YouTuber and document everything versus just really being there in the space and operating. So this weekend, I really just spent the time being an operator and learning, and less time trying to be a YouTuber and record things and video things. It's likely, or at least my goal would be, that now that I've met these people, if these people have an interest in having their layouts video recorded, that I would do it at a later time. So we did two car floats and one internal movement type of thing. He said he had 5 switch lists set up for the night, and we got through 3 of them. But yeah, I had all my camera gear there. I had extra batteries. I had my gimbal. I had, microphones and everything. But I wanted to just be there. So I did take still photos, but didn't take many videos at all. This is the only picture that I have of me actually operating the layout. Dan Shepard, who was the other person with me, took this picture. So yes, I was actually there, and this kind of proves it. And I don't know what I was doing here, but I think at this point, my brain was probably hurting a little bit. Joey, come on now. Too funny. Oh, so that's the. I did have 2 throttles with me. I have I have 2 cases that I take with me now on op sessions. I have one that says UWT throttle and one that says FRS radios. In the FRS radio one, I've just got 2 FRS radios. One's got the speaker, and then I've got an earwig thing here. So I got a main in the back up there. And the throttle case has extra AA batteries in it, and then the 2 throttles, both are TCS UWT throttles. One's a 50, one's a 100. The 50 is the one that I busted, and you can still probably see the rubber bands in there. But it's holding it's holding together pretty good. But I'm gonna add the epoxy to it just to make it up. No, it was not photoshopped. It was not AI generated. I was actually there. But yeah, so that's kind of my DOP kit to say that I take with me. Most of the operators all had throttles that you could have used. I've gotten kind of used to these, so that's kind of whatever. Yeah, and I just have a backpack. I throw everything in a backpack. I usually bring like a magazine or something to read in case I've got some spare time, and different things as well. Model Railroad first, I say YouTube second. It's a fine balance. You gotta you do kind of have to balance the 2, and I think that's something that sometimes people struggle with. Some people do better than others, but yeah. So that was my first slide show. So we got through the broken throttle, and we got through Friday night. So Island Ops is Friday night, Saturday 2 layouts, and then Sunday 1 layout. And you'll see in my next slideshow many less photos taken as we went on. So the next layout I went to was Steve Gittleman's Great Lakes and Iron Range layout. This was a very different layout. This was a much, much, much bigger layout. The layout owner is into scenery and structures, not into operations at all. Other people set up the operations for him and have helped him build that part of the layout out. So he built this layout because he wanted to do the structure and sceneries, and he worked with other people that wanted to do other aspects of the layout. So Great Lakes and Iron Range, if Split Rock's still here, there was definitely a bit of iron ore and coal and various things like that. This is the picture that I used for the live stream thumbnail. And when you were there and you looked at this picture, you were like, wow, like that looks like a painting. And then I took this photo and looked at this photo and I said, there is no way this photo is real. But it is. This is a real photo. That is one of the trains that I ran. That train went from the mountain basically down to the layout as a kind of a tourist railroad train. So it went over a lot of bridges along the way. And it was a fun train and a very photogenic train. The layout owner is also an amateur photographer. So what really interests him as well is taking pictures of the various elements. Dave BNSF, I could not agree more. It really, really, really looks like an oil painting, and it was a beautiful, beautiful scene. Here's that same train again, going through another section. You can see a lot of bridges on this layout. So that oil painting picture was leading to this bridge, which goes over the aisle. I didn't even notice that was up there. It was so high over your heads that I didn't see it until I actually ran a train over it. But the main part of the layout is on a single level, but then he's got a canyon turnout that is a single track push up this pretty steep hill that all of the coal and ore and all that stuff go up to the top. But so this is that same train coming over. Yeah, it was high over my head. That's sure. Well, I'll tell you. So that bridge over there, you need helpers to get the train up over that, especially when it's full. So you have a locomotive at the back pushing and a locomotive at the front pulling. But the way they do it is they don't consist the two together. It's one operator running the helper and one person pushing the other one. So nothing is speed matched. You're just manually speed matching it. So there were times where you would push the cars off the track because the lead locomotive was going slower than the back locomotive. I was a little nervous as well about it going over there as well. So yeah, it was a little nerve-wracking. It was not all steam. This layout had a little bit of a mix of everything. As I mentioned, this layout owner was more into the scenery and structure, so the cars and everything that he ran were just, for the most part, kind of all over the place. So here he gets into some of his more city scenes, and these, I mean, just incredible stuff. All the lighting and all the details and everything. This was kind of the areas of this were very museum quality-esque work, and that's what that's why he built it. This is what he wanted was these scenes. And so things I learned on this layout. I don't know if this is, they've been operating this layout for a little while, but there were a couple things missing. All of the areas were just labeled by name. So you would call up the dispatcher and say, hey, like I'm leaving the yard, and whatever, and they'd say, okay, you have permission to van siding, pull into van siding for a meet. Now I'm running my first train. I have no idea where van siding is. Van siding is actually Vanderbilt siding. So you kind of take off and you don't really know where you're going. So one of the things that I enjoyed on another layout that I operate on is that all of the control points are numbered. And that then gives you a sense of how far to go before you need to go to that siding. So I left. No, Rod Stewart's layout's in the UK right now. So no, this layout is not signaled. This layout is essentially Mother May I. Dispatcher controls everything. I don't know if I have a picture of the dispatcher's panel or not, but it was essentially a piece of paper on the desk with little magnets that he would move along the piece of paper. So this is the staging yard. This layout, although it is a switching layout, is essentially a loop except for the mountain pass. So you would leave this staging yard heading either east or west, and then you would come back to this do I need to address what's going on in the chat? Yes, I would appreciate it if people didn't mention other live streams that were coming up during my live stream. I would appreciate that. But yes, okay. So this layout was a loop. You would, when you were doing a road train or a local, you would go out and you would come back to this same staging yard. Here's another scene, and there's your ship. The day we were there, they weren't sending anything to the ship, so, or at least I didn't see any trains running and dumping into the ship. But you can kind of get on the right side, you can kind of get a sense of how big this layout is. This is one of those layouts where the person said he was planning the layout before he built the house. So he built this room in the house specifically to hold this layout. But yeah, so the big thing that I learned on this is when you invite people over and you tell them that they are clear to operate to a certain area, that you need to make sure that people know where that area is. Some of the areas weren't labeled, and we would just tell the train master and he'd come over with a Post-it and label the areas. But little things like that, I think that's kind of the 80-20 thing, right? I mean, like it was a huge amount of fun operating, but it wasn't until my second loop around where I kind of knew where things were and knew where the various sidings are. So yeah, so he did have steam. This is on the side of one of the yards. So he did run a bunch of steam. Again, just more and more stunning bridges. Oh, so this balloon scene, if you notice off on the right, it's kind of dark. Up on the top of those trees is where the train is crossing over to then go out onto that aisle. And up there, above those trees, he's got a thunder and lightning set up. So, the lightning was going off. He had a lot of sound, a lot of lighting effects, a lot of like different sort of elements. It was important to him that the layout was engaging. So there were some buttons in various places of the layout that you could push and it would make like horse sounds or chicken sounds or different things. John Train BFGR, unfortunately, I don't know the answer to that. But so Steve Gittleman it actually has two layouts. He actually has an indoor layout and an outdoor layout. I didn't get to operate the outdoor layout, but as I walked into his garage to go down to his basement, I passed by his outdoor layout. And just to give a little bit of an idea of his outdoor layout, it is a G-scale outdoor layout. It was pouring this day, so everything was wet. But he has some really cool scenery on his G-scale layout. The layout of his G-scale is so big, he has a G-scale helix that is, I think somebody said it's like 30 feet. I don't know if it's 30 feet long. It might have been 30 feet wide, but huge G-scale. Usually what happens is Saturday morning they run the indoor layout, and then Sunday a different group of people come over and run the outdoor. Because it was raining, they ended up running the indoor on both Saturday and Sunday. So I didn't get to operate this layout, but I did get to walk by it. And it was very impressive, just the little bit that I saw. So Saturday afternoon, we went to the West Island Club's Allegheny and Western. This is the kind of the host of the Island Ops event. I know, Joey, I know. So West Island Model Railroad Club in Hicksville, New York, hosted Island Ops and essentially organizes it. The West Island Club requires around 45 people to completely operate their layout. So this event is one of the few times in the year that they truly get to operate the entire layout. At this point, I was getting a little more comfortable operating, and I decided I want to take on a yard job. It was my first time ever operating in a yard, and it's probably the least thing that I kind of understand on the layout. And unfortunately, I got very, very few pictures of the layout. This was the workhorse that I was using for the majority of the day. They also had another little switcher. They had a couple of these consists, but they had. This is where I learned a lot about yard operations. Phil Monat wrote the chapter in the OpSync compendium on yard operations, and he was who they brought in to run the yard. And the reason they bring him in to run the yard is because, you know, you can kind of put anybody on a road train, but to keep 45 people, you know, operating throughout the session, this is the biggest yard. So he comes in as the person that knows the layout to operate the yard. So I just said, let me be the hostler, because it would be a great opportunity to learn from somebody that is very good at yard operations. But being the hostler, I only really had to focus on the engines, moving the engines around. So my job was, you know, the yard master would say, you know, I need power on this cut of cars on track 6. So grab some power out of the yard and put it on the front of track 6. And there was another guy that was moving around cabooses. This was also next to the hump yard. So while I was moving around the locomotives, the other person was taking cuts of cars that were coming in off the railroad, moving them out into the bowl so that the two people running the hump yard can pull the trains into the hump yard, sort the trains into the hump yard. When a destination was full, that cut of cars would then be pushed back into the yard, and then Phil would tell me, go get an engine and put it on this. he would then call the dispatcher and say, hey, I got a train. The dispatcher would then say, okay, we're sending a road crew. The road crew would then pick up the train and head out on the road. And then the next train would come in and we'd have to, so you'd have like 2 or 3 trains coming in, 2 or 3 trains going out the whole day, just over and over and over and over again. And it was awesome. The thing that I learned on this layout was that I have no idea how to figure out what direction a double slip is set in. They have a lot of double slips in this yard, and I couldn't figure it out for the life of me. And their control panels, I was having a hard time seeing the writing on them because the writing was very small, but the LED indicators that they had were very, very bright. So I couldn't see the writing on the panel over the brightness of the LEDs. So it was hard for me to see the panel to set the routes, and it was hard for me to look at the double slips and know which way things go in. So on every layout throughout the entire weekend, anytime you would run against a switch in the wrong direction, you would short the layout out. So when you're operating this layout with 45 operators, yes, when you were shorting things out, there were different blocks. So you were only shorting out the area that you were basically operating in, but you were shorting it out and other people were, other people would get their work stopped. The other problem with this layout in particular is that some people kept having issues, and 3 times the layout was e-stopped. And that then took a little while to get the layout back going again. So it was great. It was a lot of fun that you were essentially doing this collaborative game with 45 other operators. 45 operators, 2 dispatchers, train masters, a huge crew of people to run this layout. Took a lot of collaboration, a lot of relying on other people, to do their part. And it was it was pretty incredible. It wasn't all 45 that are new, but it was kind of up there. So technically it's set up for 1 dispatcher, but they had a new person dispatching with an experienced person. Both dispatchers were experienced, but one was experienced specifically on that layout. But dispatching 45 people, it's really hard for one person to do. You've got the phone from the yards, you've got 2 different FRS channels and stuff. So it was tough. The space that they're in is a large warehouse. They've moved to a couple different locations over time, but I forget how long they've been in this place, but it is an industrial complex warehouse that they rented. I don't know the size. If you go back, if you look up Island Ops 2023 and look at the Allegheny and Western, you can check it out. I don't know the answer to this. I do know that some of the rolling stock is privately owned, but there was nothing on this layout like, oh, you can't run that. That's a privately owned train. Any of the locomotives that were on the layout, I could, as the hostler, hitch up to a consist and send it out. They need more members. I think there are like 70 some odd members in the club, but there are only a certain amount that are active. It's $50 a month to be a member of the club. They operate every Sunday, the last Sunday of every month. They don't always get a full operating crew. So what they'll do is they'll operate portions of the layout. They've got a car float. They've got Bethlehem Steel Company. They've got a couple things that they can kind of run individually. They have a passenger yard, as well as run their passenger trains on a schedule. So there is a passenger train yard master and a passenger drill when operating the layout, and then there are road crews that are constantly taking passenger trains out. It's in Hicksville, New York, on Long Island. So, well, it's near West Hempstead. It's technically Hicksville. You can take the train. You take the Long Island Railroad out to Hicksville, and it's about a mile off the Long Island Railroad. But it was a good group of people. I had a really good time. So yeah, that was a long day. Yeah, guests are allowed, 100%. If you want to come the last Sunday of the month, just send them an email or whatever. They're always looking for guests. Yes, those C420s were stunning. Okay, so let me get through this last one, just because. So that was Saturday. That was the end of the day Saturday. I was exhausted. I didn't know how I was going to make it through Sunday. Sunday, I went to Ron Engel's Great Northern. Ron Engel essentially built 2 layouts that are connected through a hole in the wall. So how long were the trains? I'm not sure. Long-ish. 20, 25 cars, maybe. So Ron Engel had a room. So he had a single car garage with a sort of like a half car on the side. So he built one layout in the half car garage on the side, 3 decks high, pretty tight quarters. But then he decided he wanted to expand, so then he cut a hole in the wall and expanded into a like 5-foot by 15-foot room. So I was in this second room, and the 2 sections would pass cars back and forth through a hole depending on where they needed to go. I ran the local in the room I was in, and then there were 2 people working the yard in the room I was in. And I have 2 pictures of the layout because I was so busy doing a lot of other things. All of the turnouts were caboose ground throws. None of the turnouts were anything else. This was all operated on Mother May I. So you just worked with the people in the room and said, hey, like, you know, they had to bring a train up at one point, so we just worked it out together where we would meet and where they would, you know, yeah. So visitors are not allowed, or visitors are discouraged. But if you want to operate on the layout, show up and they will give you a throttle and have you operate. So. Yes. Here's another one. He had all these little shelves for the car cards that I really liked. It enabled me to kind of sort the car cards without putting them on the layout. This layout was another example of a very, very well scenic layout. Ron Engel, the owner, is about 80. He has these 2 sections finished, and he's about to punch a hole through the wall again and build out another room that will again be connected just through the hole in the wall. So I'm standing in the center of the room, and this is looking to the right is the helix and the 3 levels, and that's one of the guys running the yard. And you can kind of see on the right, that is where the doorway is. All 3 tracks go across the doorway, and they were pretty well set up that they would, you know, come down and connect into place. So yeah, so he's operating the yard on the end there. He's sitting on a stool, and if you turn to the other side, this is the other yard person sitting on a stool, and I was standing in the middle. So I was running the trains down the helix, or actually, yeah, it started at the top, ran down all 3 levels, got to the bottom, picked up a different train, ran back up again to the top, parked that train, then grabbed another train and ran back down. So that was Ron Engel's layout. So this is the whole room. If we needed to pass each other, you had to just kind of, I guess that's one of the biggest things I learned. And I was talking to my girlfriend afterwards, and she was asking me about the weekend, and I was talking about how collaborative it really is, and how, my girlfriend just sees me playing with trains, and to be able to kind of explain to her how collaborative model railroading is, and how it's really about working together and, working this sort of transportation system in model form with other people and interacting with other people. And it's not just hiding in the basement, working on your model railroad, which I think is a lot of the stereotype of model railroading, is that it's a very individual experience. But doing this weekend, getting to operate on 4 different layouts, meeting a lot of different people, working a yard with people who think very differently than you think, and working together to get the cars in and out was, it was just really great. No, he had lift out gates. So 3 lift out gates would go up, and 3 lift out gates would go down, to come in and out. Yeah, club layout, 100% teamwork. Like you wouldn't really see the other 45 operators because you were doing your job, but trains would leave and trains would come back, which meant you knew other people had to be doing what they were doing, and that was. You kind of realize just how connected we all are, and how how fun model railroading is, and how you learn so much from other people, and it was a really good time. So that was Island Ops 2023 for me. I will definitely do it again. I still feel like I'm recovering from the weekend because it definitely taxed my brain a lot, but if you get the chance to operate on somebody's layout, I would at least give it a try, at least experience it. In my opinion, start by doing a road train, get to learn the layout, learn where the different towns are, and then, work your way around to doing locals, and then working in a yard. And it's just been a great experience to me. The people in this area have been very welcoming, and I've just been really enjoying this ops journey. So, from the city that never sleeps, farewell, model citizens.
It's all about humanity. About humanity. It's all about humanity.